Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz Mclendon, and Ashley Steiner. Welcome, everyone, to another in the Dynamics Hot Dish series on field service. And today we are joined by Will Mclendon. Sorry about that. He's a senior consultant with Hitachi, and he's on today to help us learn more about field service and how different companies can use field service in different ways. So Will, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
And let's start out just with a little bit generic about you, and if you could just tell us a little bit about kind of your journey into the dynamic space and how you got started as a field service professional.
So my journey is very similar to others. I had a career in technology, and a good friend of mine had been working with CRM since the late 90s. And so when I was looking at making a change, he had been telling me about this wonderful product and what it could do. I told him there's no way in the world it'll ever take off. We went back and forth, a little bit of jarring there. About 10 years later, he was right. So it was time for me to leave network engineering, system admin, and to jump into business apps. So the job that I was at, I deployed on-prem 2012, I think it was 2012. And built a little application. I fell in love with it and wanted to get full-time into business apps. So that's my journey, and that's how I was exposed to it.
Nice. So it sounds like you started generally in just dynamic stuff. How'd you get into field service? Or was that also just sort of happenstance?
Yeah, that was, I started off in sales and customer service, and field service was really pushed to me by my friend. So he was at the time the global director of field service at Microsoft, and he said, you really need to get a specialty. And for me, the field service workflow was probably the easiest one to grasp. Sales and customer service sometimes can have these ambiguous use cases, but for field service, it was really structured for me, and it made sense. So I kind of stuck with it and just worked with it and went from there.
So when did you get into the field service space? Because I know that's you, because it's been around quite a while, but it all started with the acquisition. When did you actually specialize in field service?
I jumped into it after it was bought. After Microsoft acquired Field One. So 2016, 2017, around that space. And it was prior to that, I was I was doing customer service and sales at Empirical, where I used to work. Once it became the product that Microsoft was really pushing, and there was a lot of use cases for it, that's when I jumped on board and jumped on the train. But really, when I started with I don't know how to say this, I guess my previous employer, is that how we do that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I started with my previous employer, there were a lot of projects for it. So I had previous experience with it, and I was able, on a smaller scale, but with that previous employer, since they were enterprise, I was able to take a lot of those techniques and tips and roll them into an enterprise experience that I can give to our customers. So about 2017-ish, I would say. 16, 17.
Nice. How have you seen it evolved over the past 3 years then, since you started working with it?
Oh my goodness, clarity. I think for clarity, I think that my experience is a bit unique, and you guys may agree. CRM, D365, you can just place it and it fits, and we can use it anywhere, right? But the why behind why are we doing it was something really difficult for me to grasp. But with field service, I got it, right? Hey, we have a work order. We need to schedule our technicians. Their technicians need to know what they're doing. By the way, we need to know rates. And, hey, these roles like operators, techs, managers, they all made sense. But when it first started, when you were looking for material or information about the product, it was few and far in between. I had great resources, but there wasn't a lot of material about why we would do it. So I think Microsoft has done a great job over the last few years explaining why, the why and how it can be used in the market space. And I think it's available for everyone. My goal is that it becomes less scary for people to try. And they did a great job because they have in this newest wave, they have an accelerator, which allows you to set up a lot of that back end configuration with the product. That makes it so much more easier than it was before. You kind of had to know what and why and where these things were at and what you needed to deploy before you could actually deploy it. So I think that how-to guide, it walks most end users and consultants through, hey, here's how you configure your setup to get you going and up to speed on field service.
Yeah, and I feel like my sort of experience with field service, which is not particularly in depth, suggests that historically it's always been like, I mean, if you look at the solution, there are tons of entities in there, and you got all these different tables that you got to connect with all this different data, and you got your work order and your work order types and your resource and your booking resource and your billable booking. I don't even know what all the names are. And it's like there's a lot of setup that has to be done there.
Yeah, that's where it is. I think that's what kind of initially frightens people. And you don't know if you touch something or configure it wrong, is it going to break the entire system? And with anything, there are, those kind of gotchas. But I think what they've done in this newest release is kind of really helped everyone understand how it is. For example, if you look at scheduling, which I love, everyone knows I love scheduling. They thought for years, most people assumed that scheduling was packaged directly with field service. Like they didn't understand that it was a separate solution that you can use with PSA and field service or customer service, right? The idea, that, we can use a schedule board for anything. That was new, right? A few years back, it was something that they mentioned, but it wasn't publicized as much as it should have been. But I think with field service, that apprehension is there, but people are now seeing it. And with the new release and the new waves, it's already cool, but it'll be more adopted by hopefully, more SMB partners as well. Enterprises have seen the use cases, especially with connected field service, which is different, but they understand the need for field service. So, those are my expectations. I hope that's what happens.
Do you want to explain the difference between, you mentioned connected field service, then it's different. Do you want to explain the difference for us?
Oh my goodness, yes. So field service is field service. Now, that revolves around your work orders, SLAs, scheduling technicians. They fill out their paperwork. That initial step with the work order can be triggered by, this is just field service, by a case. It can be triggered by a manual entry. Those are the initial steps for field service, right? Or SLA, for example, right? That's field service. What connected field service does is the connected field service adds that extra IoT layer to your field service operation. So the customer doesn't necessarily have to pick up or call or initiate, hey, there's a response, we need a technician on site A. They don't necessarily need to do that. What connected field service does is it has that IoT component that will initiate your field service, and then field service will kick off, and then the process starts over. So they're different components. So if someone says, hey, we want connected field service, and they don't have an existing field service operation, then you're going to run into some problems because you're going to get alerts, but what do you want me to do with the alerts, right? So they're two separate solutions, but you see they are kind of married with each other.
Have you deployed both? But obviously you've done regular field service, but have you deployed connected?
I've done connected, yes. There is my brother, though, has done more with connected field service than I have on an enterprise scale. So if you want a good resource on connected field service, he's your guy. From the technology aspect of it, though, I get it, but he's done more with some really good use cases with IoT, connected field service. He's pretty cool stuff. He was in the Gartner report. His project
Awesome.
was in the Gartner report. So
Fancy.
kudos to him.
Maybe a future podcast topic then.
Yeah, totally. He
Have
would
to-
totally be on board for it.
I have to ask about that. How is that working like in the same kind of space or field as your brother? It sounds like you guys are super intertwined with what you do.
So that I'm laughing because you got to understand our relationship. I love my little brother, and he's my I shouldn't say little, but I love my younger brother. I love my younger brother. He loves me. I always worked in technology. His background is he was an actual architect.
Wow.
For building. I don't know much about it, but that was his space. That was his world. And he decided to jump on in after I made the switch. I've been trying to get my brother into IT for years. Kyle is just smart. Like I find very few people on this planet that are smarter than my brother. And but he doesn't vocalize it, which is great. He's incredibly humble in that respect. And I love that about him. So having him in the space, of course, I went out there first, but having him in this space has been great because we get to bounce ideas back and forth with each other. At the same time, we respect each other's privacy. So if he's having a problem on a project, I don't jump up and say, hey, that's my little brother. And if I'm having a problem on a project, he doesn't jump up and say, hey, that's my big brother. We don't do that. But I think collaborating with each other to really come up with really cool ideas, that happens all the time. True story with some of the IoT solutions that he's created. He's pinged me because he didn't know much about Power Automate, and I was able to bring him up to speed. And then he surpassed me in what he needed to know for Power Automate. So now I go back to him and I'm like, hey, how did you do that? So so he actually worked with more an IoT hub. I was central because I was easy, but Kyle could jump into hub and knows more about IoT hub than I will ever know. So it's cool. I love it. It's great. The old Southern expression is iron sharpens iron. So it's just great to have them there.
That's
Really-
awesome.
Yeah, it's like I rely on Liz and Merlin a lot for things like that. So it's kind of nice having that direct familial relationship.
Yeah,
It's feel as bad bothering them, I guess.
No,
Yeah,
it's
even
good.
on a Friday night.
Right.
No,
Which I've done.
it's good because you kind of in this ministry, you're gonna need someone to ping stuff off of, and you got to be comfortable with them. Although everyone says they're available, you may not want to, say something or ping them because you may feel like, oh, they're going to think of me differently. With my brother, there's not there. We grew up with each other, so he knows. So if I don't know it, he helps me, and if he doesn't know it, I tell him, and I don't think none the wiser. So it's good to have that. I think everyone needs that in this industry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
So I know we've been trying to define acronyms that we use. Does someone want to explain IoT in case anyone listening doesn't know what that means?
You want me to?
Anyone?
Sure.
So IoT is Internet of Things. So those are devices that are directly connected to the internet. So those devices can be anything like your Apple Watch. They can be considered things like your Wi-Fi device in your car, your cell phone. In a lot of ways is just connected to the internet. You can say that's an IoT device. But really, in the concept of field service, these are little devices that do things such as measure gas tanks, give us warnings and alerts for humidity levels in a roof device or a device that's throwing off an error. That connected device will then radio, let's say D365, and it lets us know how we need to fix it, repair, alerts technicians. So really, IoT is any device that's really connected to the internet that is used to manage, gauge, or alert, whatever word you want to use, whatever product that you're monitoring.
Good call, Liz. We always got to make sure to define our acronyms.
Yeah, I know sometimes we forget to, but thanks, Will. I think that was helpful for
If
people.
I'm talking too much, please just tell me to shut up. I'm sorry about that.
I mean, this is an interview with you, so you're supposed to be talking.
I don't think you could talk too
realistically.
much.
All right, guys.
Go ahead, Merlin.
I was going to kind of trigger off of something that you'd mentioned before when you're talking about how like Microsoft is trying to make it easier to drop field service into place and kind of get it up and running a little bit more quickly. And so I think one of the things that I'm really curious about as somebody who is now at a partner focused on SMB spaces is like, is there a way, or how are the ways that we might be able to implement field service for a smaller organization at a lower price tag? Because I feel like historically it's kind of, okay, somebody wants field service, you're thinking like $250,000 project at a minimum to just get it stood up. And I feel obviously that's outside the realm of possibility for a lot of smaller businesses, but smaller businesses still have people that they need to like send out and have like mobile device access to something, maybe do a little bit of light scheduling, maybe keep some inventory.
So,
And I feel like field service historically has been too much for that. So I'm curious your thoughts on, is that still possible for smaller organizations?
yeah, no, it is way possible. And I think there's a bit of you you kind of need to, I think partners, part of the journey with field service is defining those expectations, and understanding their business processes, right? So you mentioned managing assets, right?
Mhm.
There's things with there's asset servicing, and then there's asset management. Those are two different things, right? There's also, what is their business processes that they're taking in place? Is their primary goal to manage the inventory? Is their primary goal to satisfy customers with getting out work orders? Also, there's a component with scheduling. Um, as far as I'm concerned, right, there is a way to simply deploy it, to set it up with configuration. But really, what I've seen that really causes these, I don't want to say scope creeps because that's not the word. What can really what can really drive the cost for deployment or implementation, really can drive it up, are things that are, hey, can we customize this? Hey, we're not quick to adopt or change to this. Hey, this is what we want. So I think if you can mitigate the cost by setting those clear expectations, and really getting to know the customer's processes, as opposed to wasting more time just doing more, discovery. There's also a lot of, what you're seeing is a lot of partners are trying to create field service accelerators,
Mhm.
so that it cuts down on the cost. Now, the main reason they're doing this is because with an accelerator, you just get what you get. You can't customize it. Here it is, bam, we deployed it and we call it a day. You just get what you get. But and the real reason for that is that the client doesn't get the opportunity to say, hey, I want this. Can we take this away? Can we add this? What about this? They don't get to do that. It's an accelerator. It's here you go, bam, you get what you get. Thank you. Have a good day. It was fun. So I do feel like Microsoft with the new 2021 release is making it easier with consultants and end users to understand, hey, this is how you quickly deploy and set up, or configure field service. But it's it's still the same process. If you know it, you know it, right? So, I think you can do it now. I'm not saying $250,000 isn't the standard. I don't think it should be the standard. I'm saying, for me, that kind of, wow, if it's a small business, I don't think they'll ever be able to afford that. But can small businesses deploy it? Absolutely. And with everything becoming low code, no code in the Power Platform, you're going to start seeing more people that are able to venture off, look at it like I did, and say, oh, this isn't too complicated, and they'll be able to deploy it quicker. I think that's where it's headed.
So I have a kind of a follow-up question of that. Maybe a year or two ago, I had someone tell me once that you cannot do a field service project without at least one developer, because 100% every deployment will need customization. Will, do you feel like that's true these days?
I'm gonna get in trouble for this. I do. I do feel like you're gonna need a developer, because somebody's gonna need something customized. Like, it's not. There's always, clients always want something unique to them. They always want a new, unique experience. So some of these things are going to require some custom code, and so they'll need that. What client doesn't like form code, or doesn't want this field to show up from this event? Once an event is triggered, they don't like this field to show up. That's common. I think you're going to need developers, and they'll always be present within any implementation you do. So I don't think they need to be there needs to be something extremely special about them, but or have any special rated characteristics, but they just need to be aware of what the SDK outlines, and they'll be good to go.
So this is going to show my field service ignorance, but can you not use business rules to hide and show fields in field service?
You can do that. Who said
Well,
that?
just based on your example of like that needing code, I was curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, form code, like, I mean, you can use business rules, right? I'm just thinking out loud.
Sure.
What you could use in form code for, we hide, show fields. It's JavaScript, right? So what are some other things we do? Fetch records, save basically when on a field change, things like that. So that's what I meant by that.
Okay. Are there any other, like, I know you've touched on a little bit, but like any areas that you feel like are kind of the most dangerous from a scope creep perspective, or you've seen like it can take a reasonable sized project and really balloon like the budget?
So,
like any particular like red flags that you've noticed?
I'll tell you this right now. Scheduling and field service mobile. I can see that, I can see that blowing up quickly or very easily if you don't. For example, on one project, and I don't want to talk bad about anyone, but on one project, the territories were, instead of using out of the box territories, whoever they were with decided to create their own solution, different from territories. They created their own territory structure, which is kind of funny because it was the same self-referential entity rather, and they just threw a couple extra entities in it. They said, this is what you guys use for your territory structure. Now, during our discovery process, we were like, what is this? This is what we use. You need a territory structure over here, and this is what the product uses. So that added additional costs. So, to the project. So those are the things that you need to be careful of. So that's what I meant by talking with them, do more on discovery and finding out, and then setting those expectations, because that will play into it. In field service mobile, definitely help them understand what are the capabilities with the mobile app. I think we're all trying to figure that out right now.
I think you touched on something really important though, is like rebuilding a table or entity that already exists and having it do pretty much the same thing. I've seen that a lot with like opportunities, and I'm just wondering if there's any cases for that in field service where people are like, hey, we want to do this, and they want to build something custom rather than using what's there.
No, I think that's just across the board. I generally tell people to stick with what's out of the box. If it's there, it's there. It's cuts on cost. These are the limitations. This is what you can. And if you want to build something custom, you can go for it, but you just tell them the pros and the cons and go from there. But there's so much magic that goes, and actually I cringe a little bit because there's so much magic that goes behind field service and so much automation that's present in the system. You really want to stick with something that's out of the box because you don't want to mess anything up. And that's generally what you find out. What happens is, a partner, I'm not knocking anybody because we've all done some things, but they'll build something that's custom, and then they'll come and they'll say, hey, Microsoft, why is this not working? And then Microsoft comes in and they're like, that's because, and that's generally what happens.
Because you broke it.
Yeah, and so that's when you're like, you need a developer, because a developer will basically hack up that field service implementation and get it to work. So sorry, not trying to be mean, but that's what I meant by, hey, people will say they need developers, and that's usually what happens. So not blaming anyone, I'm not, but my general rule of thumb is try to stick with what's out the box. And I've had some implementations blow up in my face before. So that's why I mean by I try to stick with what's out of the box, because that's how I learned.
I think that's good for people to know and realize, because one of the biggest things about Dynamics, I want to say in general, is that it's get pushed on like, oh, you can customize it to however you want and customize it to your process. I mean, that's the whole thing about Dynamics that Microsoft pushes. And so I think it's a good reminder sometimes that there are parts of it that you shouldn't touch, that you shouldn't customize. You should use how it's built So I think that's a good reminder, especially when you say with field service.
Yeah, especially when you're setting up the foundation. You don't want to redo anything. So I agree. 1000%.
Indeed. On that sort of big complex topic, what's an example of the largest or most complex or craziest field service implementation you've ever done? And please,
I'm gonna
no
have
names are
fun with this.
required, but just tell about it.
So my implementations were always around the medical or in oil and gas. The one for the medical industry, it really hit home for me the most, because we started that one. We started that one during COVID. So it should have been built as it should have been. We should have had a product, I think, already built out, a rapid already developed, accelerator already developed. Let me say it that way, but we didn't. So getting to know the business processes and, you know, the whatever stage, the concept, inception stages of the agile methodology, agile process we were in happened very quickly. So getting others on board, and this is what really hit home for me, I realized that some of our resources didn't know much about field service. And that's when it kind of like my jaw hit the floor. I think we need to do a better job of teaching. So we spent a lot of time bringing other resources up to speed on field service.
Like internal resources, not the client.
Resources. Yeah, internal resources up to speed so that we can present something to the client. And so the craziest one, basically the use case was, it's funny now that we have Microsoft in 2021 set up frontline workers, because that's essentially what we were doing. You know, nurses would see their patients at different locations. So, you know, we had to set up our work orders. Scheduling was really big. That was probably the most fun, most hectic project, because they wanted this done like yesterday. So, you know, it was about a 3-4 month deployment, but implementation deployment. But that was the fun project. The other one was an oil and gas project where they were managing their tanks. I don't know if I should give the city because then everyone will know, but they were
don't name the city.
Yeah, where they would manage their tanks. So that was a more general project. But I think the one that really hit home and was like, this is crazy, I had that wow moment, was really with the medical field, getting those frontline workers up and out.
That sounds like a fast, intense project, the medical one.
Yeah. I had a few gray hairs on that one, but it was well worth it. Well worth it.
You know, I have to say, I didn't even think that field service was like the application of it for healthcare until we talked to Kyle last week. So I really like that you also have said, hey, this is where, you know, we can make an impact, especially right now during COVID times. Switching off that a little bit, have you seen any industries that it's the most popular in, or some industries that should just stay away from field service? Like it's not good for their business model?
I haven't. Generally what we see is, you know, fire, life safety, medical, like, you know, IT and communications, oil and gas, you know, places for facility management. You know, so it covers construction, it covers the board pretty well. I haven't seen any industries that are like, no, we don't need that. I do feel, and this is speaking on a point from earlier, about things that can cause things to blow up. And if someone says, hey, I can give you a solution and it'll help your technicians get to their destinations faster, it does all the routing for you, then, you know, you should turn around and run, because, you know, that's not what field service is for. That's not what it does. It can facilitate and make those things quicker and faster, absolutely. But, you know, at that point, when someone says it, they're thinking that this is like a routing tool for getting people from point A to point B. Logistics and everything plays such a big role in field service that you really have to always have the big picture in mind. So I haven't really seen Indian industries be like, we're not touching it. But I think that the more people see the need for it, they can put that big picture in mind and they're ready to go.
So I have to ask, well, I mean, we've been talking for quite a while. What haven't we asked or touched on that you think that we should have? in field service?
Oh, you guys covered it pretty well. I mean, I think you should have that's a separate podcast for the gotchas. I think that's a separate podcast, but I think you hit it pretty well. I think we know the industries, implementations, what you should do, why we should stick out of the box, and where to go. If you want to learn more about field service. Microsoft Learn is just an amazing place. I didn't have it back when I was learning it. That's when we had to log in with the partner's credentials and watch those long videos where we went to pull our eyes out. That's not what they're doing now. So Microsoft Learn has made it so much easier, and they tell you the why behind it. So definitely, if you're interested in learning, reach out to Microsoft Learn, or feel free to reach out to anyone in the community. I know we're always looking to help people upskill themselves. So yeah, that's about it.
Nice. I guess the last relevant question. Should I ask it? Does somebody else want to ask it?
Go for it.
I'm going to ask it. What is your favorite hot dish? And I guess, do you know what a hot dish is?
Yeah, what is that?
So a hot dish is basically a casserole. Something that's,
casserole?
Baked. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a big guy, so anything baked, then I'm gonna classify it as a casserole. So it has to have a crust, right?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. 9x13 pan with some layers and stuff.
All right. I'm a big guy, so I love mac and cheese. So not the mac and cheese you make on the stovetop. In the South, we bake our mac and cheese, and it's almost like a casserole. So if you're gonna do a casserole, it's got to be mac and cheese, and don't be afraid to throw some ham or jalapenos in it. Love mac and cheese, so that's probably what that is.
You put a breading on top?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That sounds pretty good.
This question always makes me hungry.
Absolutely, go for it. And take a nap after you eat it.
Yeah, food coma.
Exactly.
All right. Any last questions, Ashley? No? Liz?
No.
All right. Then, Will, thank you so much for your time today. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
talking with you.
Pleasure having you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.